This lesson is about learning to see like an artist. Yesterday we started an activity called blind contour drawing and continuous line contour drawing, and we're going to use some of the same exact concepts, except today we are focusing on this idea of proportion. So proportion is the relationships of shapes and spaces to each other. What we learned about the right brain and left brain yesterday is that artists tend to use their right brain, and that is used when they use the skills of looking at and comparing shapes and spaces to each other. The other thing that we learned yesterday and are going to use today is that artists rely on observation. They don't go back to their memory to think about how something might look. They actually look at the object that they're studying for long, is more than a glance. Observation is actually studying and yearning to really understand the object that they're looking at. So what we're doing today, we are going to be doing more exercises that force you to use the right side of your brain. And just a note, when using the right side of the brain, try not to use words that name the object being drawn. Some things on this worksheet you might be like, oh, that's a bird, oh, that's a nose. Actually, that's your left brain. So we're starting to learn how artists think, and it's not with words, it's with lines and shapes. So an artist might ask themselves, where does the curve start? How dramatic is the curve? What is the angle compared to the edge of the paper? How long is the line compared to the one I've already drawn? And how big is the space between lines? All of these questions don't have to do with, oh, I'm drawing an eye, I'm drawing a nose, I'm drawing a bird, I'm drawing a leaf. Because those verbal concepts don't help us in this task of writing. So here's how you can tell if your right brain is being used. You have no sense of time or you lose track of time. You'll have to pay attention to words. If you do hear sounds, you will not take the time to decode them into words with meaning. If someone speaks to you, it will seem like great effort to cross back, to think into words, to answer. What you are doing seems fascinating and totally absorbing. You will feel focused and concentrated. You will feel self-confident. You will think in pictures rather than words. You will notice relationships and not the names of parts. And when leaving the right brain state, you will feel refreshed. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be doing an activity that requires you to use your right brain. And the idea is that you are completing this drawing by making a mirror image of that line. And when you do that, just like the vase that's up here, or the face, it's going to look like there's two people face to face with each other. If we look at the negative space, if we look at the positive space, we see what would look like a symmetrical vase. So what you're going to need for this is a pencil, an eraser, a note card, or you can use your ruler. It's not that we're measuring, it's that we're just using it to line things up. So the first thing I want you to notice on these papers, your worksheets, and if you don't have worksheets and you're going to do this yourself, what you want to do is you want a box around your first initial profile drawing. And then you're going to need a vertical line that divides that space up in half. So that right there is a pretty tricky process. So if you want to use a ruler, you can to see, all right, this is almost 3 inches. So see how I kind of put my ruler a little bit on the side there and there, and so my mark would be at 1.5 inches. You're going to do the same thing over here, so I'm just going to do it right now. So once I have that marked out, then I can draw that vertical line. This is the halfway point. So the next thing I want to do in order to do this is I'm not going to just come right in here and try to draw it with a single line. I'm probably not going to be very successful at that. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to use some guidelines that are horizontal, and I am going to draw lines where I see there's a significant change in the line. So there is kind of where that curve moves outward. I'm going to start thinking in directions now, outward and inward. So out towards the middle, or in towards the middle, out towards there. You can just, however it works for you, do that. This one is pretty tricky. Probably like right here. So now what we do is we have created like contact points that I know at that point the line is going to be at that distance from the top or the bottom. The other thing I need to look at is how far away the line is. So I'm trying to judge how long is that and then how long is that. So they have to be, this is going to be an opposite mirror image. So it's got to be, if it's this far away from the line out there, then it's going to be the same distance out there. The same thing here. So I'm going to try to look at the distance there and make sure I have the same distance there. And then here, what is that? I'm not using my ruler to measure. So this is something that an artist does as they start to learn these, how to compare. So is this line longer than that line? Okay, here's the next one, here to here. And then, so really I'm just comparing distances at this point. I'm not even comparing how the line is going in or out or curving. So now I am going to start drawing the mirror image of this face, and I'm going to look at how far away does it start from the edge. There it is. And now I am going to think about how this line curves. So I can compare it to a vertical line. I start to do a lot of sketching on these where I make a lot of guidelines and I don't darken my line until I know that it's right. So if I look at that as a comparison, then I know it's going to come out here. Now this is a time that I use a sketchy line. Then I can erase it. This is not something you're going to be able to finish or do in one line. So once I'm thinking about how much does it curve, where does it start to curve, now it starts to go more vertical, then it starts to go in. This line here is more of a diagonal line. So what I'm thinking about is what kind of diagonal. So if I draw it in very lightly and I look at what that line does, but I'm reversing it, now the line is coming back out from the center, and then it goes in. Now how far back does it go? I could look at that. So that same, this is probably the trickiest part, how this mouth, oops, I'm not supposed to call it a mouth, how this curves back down then up. So this is a really long process for a simple, what seems like a simple line. And then I'm going to look at the distance and compare. So once I get down to the bottom, I'm not done yet. I am going in and erasing some of these guidelines and kind of comparing. One thing I can do is I could use, if you have a mirror, you could use a mirror to compare to see if it's the right line or about in the right line. Here's a vertical line. I'm going to kind of compare. It looks like this curve doesn't come out as far as that curve. So I'm going to go back and change that. So as an artist, I'm open to the idea that I might have to make changes. And I'm going to keep at it until it's right. And it's right when I'm getting a mirror image of the one onto the other side. So now it says complete the image by drawing the mirror image face and shade the vase created after it's symmetrical. So when I know it's right, I'm going to very lightly shade in the center. So any of those guidelines that I had, I don't have to worry about erasing them. I'm just going to color over them. When I shade this in, what I want you to do is I want you to shift your perception to look at this vase shape. So the black area, the dark area in the middle, is now going to be looking like a vase, and it should also look symmetrical. Symmetrical means it's a mirror image. We talked about that when we talked about the element of balance. So pretty good. I feel like there's something right in here that's not right. So I'm going to go adjust that. And I'm done. So this one is so much more complex, but I want you to start out the same way. A vertical line, go in and draw horizontal lines. Now, if you are pretty good at this, you don't have to use a note card or a ruler, but the more of these lines that you use in between, the easier it's going to be, because you're not looking at the whole entire thing at one time. You are looking at just part of it. And actually, this is something I encourage students to do for really complex ones, is take this extra piece of paper or your ruler, if you have a solid ruler, and cover up everything down here. We're not observing what's down here. You're just observing what's up here. And that helps you to concentrate on the more complex things. All right, the other side of this worksheet, or the other worksheet you might have, is called One Line at a Time, Learning to See. Again, learning to see like an artist. So the directions are to copy the line or lines in the box above into the box directly below it. Skills required. Slow, careful observation. This is not a quick drawing. Comparison of proportions. So we just started looking at that in the last activity. Looking at positive and negative spaces. So sometimes it's easier to look at in the in-between space and see if that is the right shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this one, and then you're going to apply that for all of these and these. It gets even more complex. So one thing that I like to do, like the other one, we divide it in half up and down, not sideways though, and a lot of times I will use a grid that I measure out, or I just kind of guesstimate. But the easiest way to do that here is with an X. So I'm just drawing a straight line from one corner to the other corner. I'm going to do that up here. So this gives me a spot to make contact points. So contact points are any time one of these lines crosses over a grid line, or that it touches the edge. So I'm actually going to use a different marker. So here's a contact point, here's a contact point, oops, I missed one right there, 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 there. So anytime my original drawing comes in contact with the grid line or the outside box, that is a contact point. And I'm going to use those the same way I did on Vases Faces. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this line and I see that there's two contact points. So how can I figure out where on this line that happens? Well, the first thing I like to do is just divide that line in half. So I'm taking that line, dividing it in half. I'm going to divide my new drawing line in half. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see, okay, well, this is right next to that. So I'm going to make that contact point. I'm going to look at this line because I'm going to draw this line first. So where does that touch the outer edge? So I can look at this one. That's maybe that far away, and the next one is that far away. And now I'm going to connect those two dots. And also I want to look for that, how far or how long it is. So now I'm kind of comparing and looking at the angle. And it is not quite right. It is a little off. So what I'm going to do, and you kind of see I didn't go to where I originally marked. So this is another one where you're not going to get it right the first time. All right, my next one, it hits about here, then maybe right there, then there. Ooh, then there's a lot going on. So I'm going to start on this section. Slow, careful observation. I am breaking these simple lines down into more manageable parts. So that can seem overwhelming. I don't want to look at the whole thing right now. I'm just drawing that section. Now, one thing I can do to help me, especially if it is a trickier curve, I'm looking at that curve and I'm looking at thinking, how does it curve? So this is curvier, it is rounder here, and it is straighter over here. That is not what's going on in my drawing. So I'm going to erase back, curvier over here, straighter down here. One thing that can help with this, if you want to draw over the space that you are trying to draw, this is called muscle memory. So when you do this, your muscles in your hand are memorizing that. Now this is kind of a big space. I think I'm going to draw another set. Well, it's a big space, but there's a lot going on. So if I want to divide this in half again, side to side, I go right through the middle, do that right through the middle. Now I'm looking at a new set of contact points. So this is slow, careful observation, comparing proportions. So I'm thinking about how long this line is compared to that line, how long this section is to that section. If I look up in my original, I don't think that's in the right spot. What I'm going to do is take this, divide it in half, take that, divide it in half. I need to move it over a little bit. So if you really want to practice this idea of learning how to see like an artist sees, you have to slow down and step back and use some of these probably new to you techniques that require some patience and concentration. So as I'm looking and comparing these, one thing I'm looking at is the distance between this. There is something just a little bit off as I'm comparing the two. So I'm just kind of fiddling, going up and down, looking back and forth. So you do that with all of these, you do that with all of these. So you have to, in order to do your grid lines, you have to draw on the original, and then you have to draw on the empty one. So these ones are all going to be drawn into the box at the right. So all right, artist, it is time for you to practice. Good luck.